So much, and welcome everyone. My name is Remy. I'm in the program group here in Hertz Radio Days, and also I work at NRK, the Norwegian broadcast company, where I'm head of podcast in my region, which is the mid-region of Norway. So I work with podcasts. Designing the future of audio, that's the tagline of this year's Radio Days Europe. The future is digital. And with the big tech companies and global streaming services, the competition is harder than ever. We are now going to see two solutions to the problem. One from a public broadcaster, which is NRK, and one from the commercial media group Bauer. And after their presentations, we will have a discussion where we will look at the different approaches and the potential pitfalls of the future ahead. If you have any questions, then I would love to see your arms up, and we will have some questions from the audience as well in the discussion part. So let me just introduce the speakers. We have Tobias Nilsen from Bauer. You can just stand there. Great. And we have Katinka Rondan from NRK and Ole Birger Nergård also from NRK. You can sit down. Katinka Rondan is head of radio at NRK, and Ole Birger Nergård is a product developer. He has made the NRK radio app. We will have a presentation from Katinka, Ole Birger soon, but first, Tobias Nilsen from Bauer. Show us what you got.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining. I realized a week ago that we are on at the same time at what keeps the CEOs up at night. I think that's sort of a double booking because I hope this is some of the stuff that keeps the CEOs up at night. But thanks all for joining this track too instead of being at the other one. Now I just need to make this work. Press next. It doesn't. Try now. Yeah. We are Bauer Media Audio. I guess some of you have seen other presentations from my colleagues earlier today. So just in short, we are Europe's largest and leading commercial radio broadcaster and audio operator. We operate across 9 markets in Europe, where we create engaging and entertaining content across 150 radio brands, reaching more than 61 million listeners every week. We are part of Bauer Media Group, that is a family-owned media company that actually can celebrate 150-year anniversary this year. Yvonne Bauer is the active chairman of the board, and she is actually an active 5th generation of the Bauer family in a company that started as a publishing business. Short on me, I'm Tobias, I'm Danish. That's why my accent sounds like it does. Started as a radio presenter back in the 90s, became content director in Denmark for many years, and then I got a opportunity to work at our audio team in UK, so I moved to London in September, and now I'm looking after digital, as it's called. I work closely with a central team of digital people, and then the leadership and Bauer teams across all 9 markets. And basically, we are here to support all our markets in all the digital B2C activities, which includes consumer insight, digital content, digital marketing, distribution and partnerships, and then product and engineering, which is one of the main topics of this session. As a commercial company, it is our main priority to reach the widest audience possible, because we know that the wide reach at radio and audio is one of the main USP for the advertisers and main reasons for advertisers for choosing radio and audio. To build and grow our digital audience, we offer our trusted and engaging content, including radio stations and podcasts, across our own products, app, web, and smart speaker integrations. We have strong partnerships with the tech partners, including Amazon, about direct integration into smart speakers, which is an extremely important driver for IP listening, especially in the UK market. And then we work closely with the leading aggregators of radio stations, including Radio Player and Xperi, as you'll meet them today, but also TuneIn. We are keen to offer a high-quality listening experience to our audience and ensure that our audience can enjoy our content in an easy and convenient way, as we believe this to be some of the reason for why people choose radio stations. In spring, we launched Rayo, our first aggregator platform across app, web, and smart speakers. We have had an aggregator in the Nordics for years, but this was the first aggregator product we had in UK. And what's special about Rayo is that it's built in-house by our product and engineering team. For the last many years, we've used external platforms from a company called AIM, which is the same company as Xperi, by the way. So the special thing about Rayo is that it's been produced in-house and still is being built in-house. Since the launch, Rayo has become the most popular app we have in UK. We still have all the branded apps from the radio stations, but now Rayo is the most popular Bauer app in UK, and we continue to grow the number of users week by week. So let's say hello to Rayo.
We had a clear aim: establish a new unified audio brand. It had to be cross-platform, and it had to offer a great experience for our listeners. So, say hello to Rayo, the place to listen to all Bauer's radio stations, as well as exclusive playlists and special shows. It's a new thing for our listeners, but it's supercharged by all our brands that power it. Rayo is going to be famous for high-quality content on demand, expertly curated mood-based playlists, as well as the place to go for major music and popular culture moments, like the Brits. We've introduced Rayo to our listeners by weaving it into the fabric of all of our output from day one. References appear wherever possible, from top-of-hour news intros to trails and live reads. Talking about it naturally helps our listeners feel our excitement and understand that Rayo is just a new place to hear their favorite music and people. Phase 1 of our marketing strategy focused on migrating existing, highly engaged audiences and included a sophisticated blend of original social media content, email, push notifications, and in-app banners to drive engagement and complete the migration journey. Also, we're using groundbreaking tech. In a UK first, along with 11 labs, we've developed an AI-generated voice that is the voice of Rayo. Subtle touches on air at the moment, but with huge future potential within the app, on air, as well as some exciting external marketing opportunities. And this is all driving results. Rayo is now the most used app from Bauer Media Audio in the UK. We built a strong foundation with the launch of Rayo in the UK, and this is just the beginning. We are launching Rayo Premium on app, where you can experience ad-free versions of all our main radio brands, plus access to exclusive stations created for our subscribers. We're enhancing our podcast lineup by providing an expanded choice of favorite podcasts. And as we continue to innovate, we're expanding internationally, launching Rayo across more markets within the Bauer Media Audio portfolio. Stay tuned, the best is yet to come with Rayo.
Thank you. I'll give the credit to the team that made the film, not me. In-car listening, as you keep hearing across all the sessions, is obviously one of the cornerstones for radio distribution, as more than half of radio listening across Europe is in cars. For decades, we had the monopoly, or we were like the duopoly. You could choose to listen to your own music, or you could choose to listen to radio. So for decades, we had the monopoly of curating entertainment and music. We no longer have that due to all the opportunities people now have in the dashboards. We believe, as I gladly hear other radio companies as well, we believe it's extremely important for us to secure radio distribution in cars with the important role radio plays, also in society, bringing trusted news and entertainment to the audience. In the digital world, our distribution includes hybrid radios like the ones from Radio Player and Xperi, and dedicated radio apps from aggregators from the likes of TuneIn. We are the industry that produce the content, so for us it's important working with these collaborators, partners, that we keep having a free distribution, a free way to the audience, as we are the one providing all the content. So that's a key point in our collaboration with them. And another one is obviously for us to have full access to all the user data that we found extremely important when it comes to content planning and content production. Three main key takeaways. As a commercial company, it's important for us to offer the widest reach as possible, be where the audience are. Our digital distribution is not a one-way strategy. It got three main pillars. It's about our own and operated products, now Rayo in the UK. It's about collaboration with the tech partners and the aggregators. And then it's about for us to work together in coalitions to secure distribution of radio in cars for the future. And what's interesting is that we keep hearing that statement across all sessions. So I think an important question for us and for me is how this is gonna be done for the future, and not only agreeing that it's important, but also that we got a shared plan for how to secure that. And that was my 10 minutes.
Thank you, Tobias.
We saw it. Should I just start?
You're ready? You can just start.
Yeah.
But maybe I can just one short question, Tobias. When will Rayo come to other countries than UK?
I think we said watch this space. It will be soon, and soon enough.
Great, thank you. Then Katinka and Ole Birger.
Yes,
Go ahead.
thank you. My name is Katinka Randen. I'm head of audio at NRK, which is the public broadcaster in Norway.
And my name is Ole Birger Nergård, and I work as a UX designer for NRK Radio.
So to tell you where we are coming from, NRK in Norway, we are on DAB, and on DAB, the radio channels from NRK have a 69% market share. So it's quite a good position we could lean in. But we have realized that to succeed as a broadcaster in the future, we need to succeed digitally, and of course, DAB is also digitally, but for us it is to focus put all of our focus in the future direction, not try too many things at once, but have a very clear target to succeed. And for that, it is our app, NRK Radio. In NRK Radio, we have 13 radio channels, we have radio shows on demand, and we have around 60, 70 active podcasts and an archive of 300 podcasts. My main goal for this brief presentation is to talk about that to succeed digitally in the app and streaming world, content, publishing, and product all have to work, and they have to work together, and you have to think about all three at the same time from the beginning. To start with one of the most difficult questions, maybe, publishing, also understood as distribution, is an area with a lot of existential questions. Even though traditional broadcasting still is strong, it's declining, and online audio is rising. So, if we look far enough into the future, if the future for audio is streaming, who controls the future? And what does that mean for us, especially NRK as a public broadcaster? In 2021, we had 80-90% of our listening to podcasts was on third-party platforms. We had a very thorough review of all the upsides and downsides of third-party publishing. And we realized that the upsides to exclusive publishing, exclusive distribution, were very important to us. For one thing, there is editorial control. We have experienced censorship when we've been on third-party platforms, like removing sexual education podcasts, maybe removing part of the logo of NRK. We also see that having publishing control is also very important for us as a public broadcaster. It's not the most important content we want to show the listeners all the time. We have to show what's important that they discover right now. It could be maybe a poem podcast, or it could be the most important news that's happening right now. And also we saw that the listeners to NRK's podcasts on third parties, alarming high amount of them didn't know they were listening to a podcast from NRK. Even though we had the logo there, we had this tagline saying you are listening to a podcast from NRK, they still didn't know. And if you don't know that the podcast you love comes from NRK, in the future you don't realize that you need NRK or that NRK is important. And of course, there's user data ownership, and very importantly, direct dialogue, direct connection with your audience. And we know also from Reuters Institute that that is one of the key elements to trust, is to have direct contact with your audience. So we concluded that we can only succeed as a public broadcaster on our own platform, NRK Radio. So we decided to drive the audience home to our own app. And it was, of course, frightening. People were saying, others, the big tech apps are so much better than ours. Their app has so much content, we cannot compete. People love to have all their content in one place. We don't want to mess with their habits. But we still did it. Step by step, for every time we pulled some of our podcasts back, we grew a little more. And especially if you see on the right-hand side on the top there, that is one of Norway's most famous documentaries ever. And there you see both how important good content is to drive listeners to your platform, but also we wouldn't see that mountain graph if that podcast had been able to you've been able to find it everywhere. So, apps, and today we have grown to a second place in Norway when you ask the listener which apps or services you have ever used to listen to a podcast. Listeners listen to more of our content when they come to NRK Radio. So I think this is program setting like we are used to on radio channels, but in a digital era. As a public broadcaster, we need to have the audience exposed to the width of our offering, not only the most popular, and sticky content attracts listeners who discover other content. So that brings me over to content. To be able to attract listeners to your platform, your content has to be good enough, interesting enough, young enough. You have to listen to the listeners' needs and keep your focus on the audience and their needs and what they would like. And maybe also ask yourself, what are your strengths? The large number of audio platforms advertise with having everything whenever you want. For an audience who thinks there's already too many choices in the world, it doesn't help and you don't stand out. What listeners choose when they listen live and when they listen on demand, it isn't quite the same. We see they choose different genres. There's something that happens to the listening habit when you know what you're listening to is not live. And radio and podcast complements each other, and you have to use that well. So it's very important to continue to develop the live format. I heard from someone talked about from the Inclusive Summit yesterday, the Henry Ford quotation that if you ask people what they need, they'd say faster horses, but we made cars. I think we have to think about that in radio, that we're not putting radio in an app, we're making a completely new experience, and you have to make live for that experience, which means change the live experience. And also, to attract the listeners, we have to have podcasts that change their habits. So when they're used to being somewhere else, they still would like to come to us. So we aim to be best on news, good company, and music live. And on podcast, we aim to be best on documentaries, factual shows, and comedy. And comedy is the most important genre for the next generation. Traditionally, listeners in NRK Radio were either live listeners or podcast listeners. And now we see an increase in listeners that choose both formats. NRK measures itself in daily listeners because we want to be that ambitious and focus on keeping our strengths every day. So you are sure that the listeners come to you every day. And traditionally, also, radio is an everyday habit, so why not keep holding on to that habit? To be able to do that, we have higher frequency on several products. We have frequently publishing on our biggest podcast streams, and we build habits in seasons and holidays. So volume is an important issue here. And to help to be discovered, it has to be tempting, appealing, and easy to choose. And that's in titles, it's in feature texts, it's in graphics, but it's also in product development.
Yes. So after talking about the publishing and the content, it's time to talk about the most important parts to me, the NRK Radio app. We're doing a lot of work to build habits for our users. And the most recent thing we're working on is the children's experience in NRK Radio. So right now, we're making a separate kids universe in NRK Radio, where all the shows are safe for kids and where the user interface is more sweet and inviting for the kids. We're also working on new ways to promote live radio. Our publishers are always highlighting the shows that are live right now, but you can also go to the series page and press play there, just as you would with a podcast. So we're trying to melt down the walls between the different formats. We also see a large increase in live listeners in NRK Radio at the moment. So we're trying to build on that momentum to build a good user experience for the live listeners. We're also using video clips to promote new podcasts. This is especially for the TikTok generation, because we see that the threshold to start a new podcast is too high. So we wanted to make you get to know the show hosts and sort of get the vibe and the mood in the studio before you press play. So that's also something that we're working with. And speaking of video, we're also working on video podcasts like everyone else. We just launched our video podcast feature in NRK Radio, and many of our competitors offer this already, so we have to provide it in NRK Radio too. The audio is still the most important part for all of our podcasts, but you can anytime just press the full screen button, and then you can choose to watch in addition to listening. And we already see that around 10 to 15% of our listeners choose to do that, to watch, and not just listen. One of the most important features in NRK Radio is also one of the most basic ones. We have the opportunity where you can press follow on a podcast. You just hit this little star button, and then you can get push notifications about new episodes, but you also get these shortcuts to the program on the front page, several shortcuts. So the show hosts and podcasters have found out how important this is to their podcasts. So now everyone is talking about on air how you should follow the podcast in NRK Radio. So that's an important marketing channel for our app, actually. So there are many synergies here. We kind of build new features, and then the show hosts promote them for us. Another thing that the show hosts are talking about on air is the possibility to send messages to the studio from the NRK Radio app. Until now, this has only been possible through social media or through email. But right now, we can lead listeners from DAB over to NRK Radio to sort of interact with the studio from there. This is a great tool for the radio hosts to have a dialogue with the listeners. It also gets them great content for their show, and it makes them talk about the app all the time, which is great for us. And we also just launched the opportunity for the show hosts to reply to the listeners. And if you get a reply, you also get a push notification, which brings you back into the app. So that's another synergy, I think. The last interactive feature that I wanted to mention is the possibility to vote on polls from the studio. We have this both on live radio and for podcasts, and this is an even easier way for the listeners to interact. You just have to click a button and reply what you choose, and instead of just composing your own message. And this feature gets talked about on air a lot too. And as Katinka mentioned earlier, most of our listening still happens on DAB. So every time you promote this kind of feature like this, it leads the listeners from the traditional radio formats over to NRK Radio to listen on demand or listen to live radio from there. My last slide is the one that we're very proud of too. Most of the features that I've mentioned so far are behind a voluntary log-on wall. But this really works because 80% of our app users are already logged in. If you log in, we keep track of your progress. We make your front page more personalized. You get functionality like offline listening. You can add episodes to your queue. You can make a playlist of new episodes for you and the audience interaction, as I already mentioned. So it actually makes sense for the users to log in. They see why it's important to do that. And since you get to unlock a lot of new features and you get a much better user experience, it all seems worth it.
So our experience is that when you work together, you grow together as a group in your job and also with results, as you see illustrated here. In unique users for the NRK Radio app from 2020 to 2025, and 2025 is only 2.5 months old, but the growth we've had in 2025 is actually almost only or mainly due to live listening in the app. Because it's been because of the features that Ole Birger has just explained, and also because the world is a bit crazy now, and we just had the World Cup of skiing. So our goal for NRK Radio is to be the preferred app for Norwegian radio, and here are our contact info if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Ole Birger. We will continue the discussion, Katinka and Tobias. Also, if you have any questions, please signal it to the persons with the microphones, and we will get to you shortly. First, a question, Tobias. I just went to see Tony Pastor from Goalhanger in track 1, and he talked about their shows, The Rest is Football, The Rest is History, and so on. And he said that their listeners are worth more on some platforms than other platforms. For example, worth more on Spotify versus YouTube. Is your listeners worth more in your own app? Or how is that?
Yes, they are, which relates to data, obviously, because to your point about login, if people listen to us on our own and operated products and we give them a reason to sign in and log in, then we got much more data than we do if people listen on third-party platforms. So obviously, I keep saying for us, it's about being where the audience is, reach the widest audience possible. But on the other hand, we obviously have a priority about how we would like users to engage with us. And the owned and operated product is obviously our first priority. So yes, that's true.
And Katinka, I think, or I know that many people here are wondering, what has been the impact really by pulling shows from Spotify?
And
Could you answer that?
It's like I don't understand the question because do you mean have we lost listeners?
Yes.
No, no.
Are there some demographics that has been harder to move, maybe?
Well, it's well, of course, listeners under 30 are harder to move, but I genuinely believe that that has to do with the offering. So we see that some of the podcasts we withdrew from third-party platforms are young people's our favorite podcasts, and they are willing to move to a new platform to get their favorite content because they have a very close relationship. They are fans. So in a way, I believe that it just focuses us more on what we have to do to reach the audience we don't always reach. And to be honest, we had this when we when we had done pulled away from all third-party platforms. We did this like which listeners were hardest to move, and it was men around 50 who are very interested in tech.
I know
Because they want it to be the hippie era where podcasts are everywhere.
Yeah. Talking about RSS feeds, maybe.
Yeah.
I know that you did an exercise where you pretended to be different demographics going into the NRK app. What did you find then?
Yes, we decided, because we have this ambition to deliver every day to all listeners. It's important for NRK to deliver to most Norwegians because we are public owned. And so we tried to make a publishing week if you were 13 years old, and we saw that week, or the offering for a week for a 13-year-old, was much weaker than the offering for a 50-year-old interested in culture and politics, maybe. So it helps us focus on having equal offering for the whole of the audience.
Let's see. Do we have any questions from the audience? I see some here. Do we have a microphone, for example? There we have one.
Hello, Sarah Toporov from Headliner. I have a question for Katinka. You mentioned that you had to sort of design a new live experience, like editorially, for streaming. What kind of changes did you make, and what were the differences like between, I guess, the traditional live radio show that we think of?
Well, I mean, we have 13 radio channels, so we're not. I mean, this is something we have to do all the time. But in the future, just keep developing and changing for the future. But I think the stress on that it is live is a unique quality, and we see that our news channel, for example, has quite an amount of young listeners and is increasing along with the live news morning show. And also with the features we have, you have the opportunity to engage more with the listener. But I think for many of us working in NRK, when you start to develop content from the perspective of the app, you start to think differently than you do when you're more traditional broadcaster sending off. Here is my content. Here, I think it's more engaging with the audience, and I think we also have to develop to be faster, not so planned on air, to be more relevant. And just keep focusing on the uniqueness that is live.
Did you have any other questions as well?
Yes. Hello. I have a question. I have two questions actually, and it's about. So you're a public organization. So could you imagine, for example, on one hand, to open source or to bring private organizations into your app, so to have your own ecosystem, your own Norwegian ecosystem, for example, or on the other hand, technically to say the framework that you build with your app, open source it and provide this to other companies as well?
We in Norway, the Norwegian commercial and public broadcasters cooperate with Radio Player. And we are our own also Radio Player, so that is an important collaboration for us, where you can have the total of the Norwegian offering from also commercial stations and there. So I think that's where we do that, and because we are a public broadcaster, also the whole editorial control is important. So we have to be editors of the content we have. So that makes some of it maybe more difficult. But we've also talked about collaboration with Nordic public broadcasters. But I think that one thing is for certain in this business now, and that's nothing is for certain. So who knows what the future holds?
Could I just ask that question to Tobias as well? How do you think about collaboration within your app?
As I said, I think industry-wide collaboration is one of the key pillars in our distribution strategy. So obviously we also co-owner of Radio Player, see that as an important way for distribution in cars. I think each audio company with a size that allows it are to build their own products. Just like we got Rayo in the UK, and in UK Global got a player, BBC got a player. So I think for me, it's about how we ensure for these to be integrated into the wider platforms, like the deep linking conversation we have in cars and so. But I keep thinking that the competition about the share of ear is so intense. It's much more challenge for the radio industry than it was 5 or 10 years ago. So for us, it's not about how to limit our distribution, but on the other hand, how to secure the distribution. So we keep being where the audience is, because as I said in the beginning, at the end, as a commercial company, it's important for us to have as many listeners as possible, whether that being to our radio stations or to our podcasts or other audio formats.
But our experience is that we gain listeners by not being everywhere. And it increases our brand. So we become more clear in a way, an alternative. And what is important about Radio Player is we're co-owned and it's owned by publishers. It's editorially owned. And that's what I think, and also has deep linking. So it sends the listeners to NRK Radio in the end. And I think it's not like all wide distribution isn't the same, because there's a lot of distribution that has no editorial ownership. And if I'm going to try to be, I mean, Elon Musk isn't doing a very good job in creating trust in big tech giants these days. So I think it's if you think far enough in the future, you could also be building somebody else very, very strong on your good content, and then you lose the control when they're stronger than you in the future.
Which I think is an important conversation to have. I mean, again, if you look at the UK market, 70 to 80% of radio listening, digital radio listening, is now on smart speakers. And some, I wouldn't say my own opinion, but some doesn't like the owner of Amazon. But reality is, if we as an industry will keep being relevant and keep being available to the audience, I think it's important for us to enable the technical opportunities we have as an industry.
But because you know, NRK isn't on TuneIn either, and for example, also for people who are blind. I mean, smart speakers isn't big at all in Norway.
I know.
But for blind people, it's very important. But so we're not on smart speakers right now, but Radio Player is working to get us on smart speakers, but as radio club, you know, for all of us. But then also with deep linking, so they essentially come to. So it's we realize that we have to, you know, be discovered. But it's you know, to keep some of the editorial principles and control for the future.
Thanks. Did you have a second question? Or have you maybe...
I have a question here.
Yeah,
I'm Morten from Bauer Media in Sweden. Katinka, I won't talk about the skiing in Sweden, because but just another question regarding podcast and live format. You said the podcasts were promoting your live format. You had this sort of, didn't you say that they promoted to listen to your radio stations, FM? No?
No.
No, you cross-promote between, so radio say
No.
you should listen to the podcast, and the
Yes.
podcast, are they promoting your radio?
That goes, but the radio, because of all the good features, the radio programs, they use actively in making the program also the features in the app. So they talk about the NRK radio app. So then all the radio listeners we have on the AB are invited into
Okay, so they promote to the platform.
Yeah, but what I think what I said was that it's important that the whole radio versus podcast. It's not very interesting. It's a listening experience live, and it's a listening experience on demand, and you have to find the content that is best on demand and that is best live, and that they complete each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
We have another question here, I think.
Hi, I have a question for NRK, Matej from Radio Slovenia. In a way, you're similar. Slovenia is also a very small market, and we don't have a lot of resources to focus on apps. And I imagine that you decide on the budget of the radio in NRK. So, in order to focus more on apps, where did you cut the budget? Or like,
Well, and
what services did you kill?
Yes, NRK is TV and online news and radio. So, so NRK as a total decided, I think it was maybe 9-10 years ago, that we have to put more money in tech, and I think they cut a little bit everywhere. I was at that time I was actually working outside of NRK, but it was a little bit from everywhere, and just focused a lot of resources in tech.
So I want to hear, is there anything that you're no longer doing at the radio because of the...
We talked earlier, and he congratulated me because we've stopped doing traffic.
Yeah, NRK got rid of the traffic department, so to speak.
Yeah. Because and that is that's the whole, when you have maps in your cars who tell you exactly on the street if there is a queue or where another route. You don't really, and Norway is also a long country, so most of the traffic isn't, Yeah,
what you're talking about was a live service on the radio, which updated everyone on where it was a queue or an accident or that sort of thing.
Yeah, and there's when we're talking about radio in cars, how important is the traffic? And so we've taken the chance, but it's gone well, so that it's not that important anymore. So that's live for a new era, maybe.
To conclude a bit, what should we be aware of in the future, do you think? What are the potential pitfalls, and what are you afraid of?
I think it would be a failure if we don't manage to collaborate as an industry. I think it's important for us, now that we all agree on the what and how important it is, I think it's important we go for the next step and find out how to secure distribution in cars. And then obviously for some radio groups that got the capacity and the budgets, it's important to develop own apps. For those who don't, I think an initiative like Radio Player is important, so also something to support.
I agree. We have. It's important to focus more on what we have in common and less on what we don't have in common. So collaboration for the future of audio, I think, is important.
Which also goes across industry. I think being in Denmark for many years, the main competitor was DR. So every Monday we looked at the ratings, saying, "Oh, now we've won some share or lost some share." I think those days are over, because now it's for us as an industry to go into the fight about share of ear with all the other the millions of other opportunities people have for entertainment.
Editorial media versus big tech. Is that what I hear? In the
Yeah.
sort of.
At least, yeah, and also focus on, also the political awareness of how important it also is for radio in cars, and
Because of the important role that radio play in society, including news and local trusted content as well.
and good company.
Thank you so much, Tobias Nilsson from Bauer and Katinka Rondon from NRK. If you like this session, I can recommend a session tomorrow morning at 9 in track 1. It's called Live Radio in the Digital Future, and will be more deep dive in what are live radio doing in the digital future. Thank you so much for coming.